Support for NPR and the following message come from 20th Century Studios' The Dog Stars. Director Ridley Scott returns with a gripping post-apocalyptic thriller, starring Jacob Elordi, Josh Brolin, Margaret Qualley, and Guy Pearce. Only in theaters and IMAX August 28th.
What is the most unhinged thing you sincerely believe?
This is going to sound crazy, right? But I really believe that you find what you look for. Right now, we live in a world in which, grievance dominates. The evidence of being heard is punishment, grievance, and vengeance. The reason why I like this idea that you find what you look for is because you can look for joy. And you can look for it amidst anything else that's happening. And it's quite unhinged because if you don't spend a lot of time with people who have young children, you would imagine that the world is ending. Through each generation, when tomorrow looks doomed, the parents are looking for hope for their children and they find it. And so that's an unhinged belief, right? That you can find what you chase.
While our country panics about literacy rates and attention spans, Reginald Dwayne Betts sees opportunity. As a poet, Dwayne is intimately aware of how language can expand our imaginations. But prior to his life as a poet, he was incarcerated at age 16 for an armed carjacking and was sentenced to 9 years in prison, which included some time in solitary confinement where books, the one thing that gave him a window into other worlds, were not allowed. This experience inspired him to create Freedom Reads, an organization that brings books into prisons and creates physical libraries, also called Freedom Libraries, to help people dream beyond their immediate environments and imagine lives with beauty, hope, and possibility. Today, Dwayne joins me to talk about how literature has informed his life's work and what it means to find what you chase. Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. You've described books as a means of survival. We can see how that was true for you. You've talked about that. You've written about that. But it's also an experience that is true for so many people who have lived lives very different from yours, very different from mine. There's billions of people on this world who have had that experience in some way. What is it about books that help us survive?
I think a colleague wrote me a letter. And in the letter, she didn't tell me anything about her life or her childhood, but she wrote about books being a source of the world that was missing. And I read the letter and it literally had me crying because it was, we often get confused. We imagine that the thing that connects us is our skin color, our complexion, our complexion, our culture, our profession, but it's not. It's the ability to be touched by a story. And I think that's just the fundamental thing that people who love books recognize. And it's the kind of promise you make to the book that the book may or may not fulfill. But it's this promise that if you give me your time and your attention, I will transform how you see a world and a life.
A lot of media theorists have been speculating that we are moving toward a post-literate society. People are not reading as much anymore. Our attention spans are shot. Children, younger people seem to be struggling with reading now more than they have in past generations. How do you encourage reading? How do you even think about encouraging reading when reading has kind of become passé?
But I see people reading all of the time. Facebook is filled with words. And even when you go on Instagram, the captions are functioning as mini poems. I think people are saying that people aren't reading books, and how do we combat that? And I understand that they're saying that books have sold, but you got to recognize, I think that we are running a risk of being talking to each other. When our medium of conversation is just grievance and argument and complaint, my duty as a poet is to be able to give you a poem if you at the bus stop, if you at the liquor store, if you are a older woman that is volunteering for the local bike race, And I stop and I read you a poem because I wrote a poem about riding a bike with my son. And so I kind of think that what we need is more zealots for literature. We need more people that are saying that this might actually transform what the world looks like.
I mean, yeah, when you talk about transforming what the world looks like, one of the things that immediately comes to mind is the Freedom Libraries that you founded that are all over the country. For those who aren't familiar, can you explain what Freedom Libraries are and how you got the inspiration to start them?
I mean, it does go back to books being a pathway to freedom for me because, every time I struggled to get a job or to be accepted in society because of my criminal record, I would go back to college. And that would provide me with, actual sustenance and intellectual sustenance because I would get student loans, I would get scholarships, and I would get space to build up credentials and kind of to build up a resume and a reputation that could compete with my criminal record. I was in a PhD in law program because I wanted to be a law professor and also because I couldn't afford rent in the local community and I could afford student housing. And people say things like, I'm a hustler and I am a survivor. I knew that I could take care of my sons better being a PhD student and having my loans on forbearance while I was a student and being able to get a 3-bedroom in student housing than not to be able to afford the 2-bedroom that I had in the community. But the truth is, though, I'm also an artist, and I kept coming up with ideas and dreams. And so I felt like, people don't read poetry as much as I want them to. What if I started to learn things about heart? What if I did a solo show, a theater piece where it was just me on stage for 40 minutes? I convinced a foundation to support the project. And during the process of working on this show, I got 6 of my friends out of prison. And all of those stories are interwoven in the creation of the show. Wow. But the thing was, after that happened, some folks from the Mellon Foundation asked me what would I do if money wasn't an issue for people who were incarcerated. And it was the first time in my life, actually, where somebody asked me to dream about a world where I was unencumbered by my time in prison. Suddenly, I was asked to say, what would I do for people in prison? Not what would I do for me, or not what was the burden that incarceration put on my life, but what would I do for somebody else? And
it's a very different question.
I mean, it makes you, it makes you remember that part of the gift is when you secure enough and safe enough and healthy enough that you can actually contemplate what the answer to that question is. I mean, I understand. I mean, if you go to prison as a kid, man, like sometimes you're just trying to figure out how to deal with the next 20 minutes. And you don't even see a world where like you could be useful. And so she asked me that, and I said, we put millions of people in prison, I will put millions of books in a prison. I mean, part of it was to imagine that prisons are too frequently invisible to the communities, and people in prison are too frequently invisible to themselves. And I wanted to bring books in the shape of these beautiful handcrafted libraries. I mean, they made out of wood, they stand 44 inches high, and about 7 people could circle it so that it creates a location for community. In prisons, you have some spaces of community, basketball court, the weight pile, but it's way more spaces of conflict. And you never like see, wood in a prison. You never see, oak, cherry, maple, walnut, and you never see things that are handcrafted. And we effectively have, figured out how to create a manufacturing business, a furniture manufacturing business, and a logistical company that navigates, every state in this country. And actually, our deep and close collaborators are the Department of Corrections. So we've managed to do this without feeling like we have to lead with demonization and we have to lead with animosity. And part of that is because there's 8 people on my team who served time in prison, and we all recognize that vis-a-vis the crimes that we were convicted of and that some of us committed, we have lived as pariah. We have lived as the people who most people in society believe deserve condemnation. And so we're able to go in our work with the Department of Corrections in a really, really different way. And I think be models of a different kind of leadership from top to bottom within the organization.
I wonder, a lot of people, I think they find it difficult or impossible to return to a site that holds trauma for them, as I imagine that prison holds trauma for you and also probably some of the other people that you work with. Yeah. But you have centered your life around that now. Why? And how do you manage that?
I literally once wrote this poem, and I was like, it doesn't matter what I do when I go home because the people who need to see it most won't. And I was thinking about people in prison because when I did my time when Hillary Clinton was talking about super predators. And so I know that I didn't do my time in a world where progressives and people in my community just thought that I shouldn't have went to prison as a 16-year-old. And for me, going back is just like, I don't know, maybe duty. I don't feel bad. I think I go back and it's a duty. And I wasn't supposed to survive prison. So I think maybe in some ways going back is making peace with whatever deal I made with God or the devil at the crossroads. I didn't make a deal with the devil though, because I got to tell you, if I made a deal with the devil, this would have been so much easier. See, God is on some Jobian business, you know what I mean? And that's why I know my deal has always been with God, because he was like, brother, I'm going to tell you something. You're going to have some bad years, but then you're going to have some bounty too. And when you get some bounty, you better know it ain't just for you.
I wonder what's been the most like profound or surprising experience that you have had with the Freedom Libraries, even just seeing other people get joy out of it or experience it or have a strong reaction to it, whatever that is.
Really, it's too plentiful. I mean, we get letters. I mean, some of the stuff is just deeply, deeply moving. I mean, like, it was this cat in Rikers named Raphael, who was a carpenter, who saw the Freedom Library and went to help just because what he saw was so beautiful. He was from a family of carpenters from the Dominican Republic. He asked how could he help, and he said that, he a military veteran. And so in his letter, you got a child of immigrants that is a citizen, that is a military veteran, and a carpenter talking about how we changed the shape of his day because of the beauty that we brought to Rikers. We did a program in a Missouri prison, and we get a letter back, and it's $1,000 in the letter. And the guy says, man, I'm doing life in prison, and I have never felt this free. And so I want you to have all the money I have to my name. Wow. We got a letter from a woman in California when we first opened up the Freedom Library. And she says, look, I come here, and I see this beautiful wood, and I'm wondering what's going on. And I walk down the steps, and there's books, and they brand new, and they smell new. And she says, I'm enjoying the books, and then I see a woman that I had conflict with for weeks. And then she smiled, and I smiled, and the tension disappeared. I mean, like the number of letters that we got letters from people's mothers talking about they hadn't heard that much light in their kids' voice since they had been locked up. And I think about my own kids, and I recognize that one of the things that they have, and they've always had, is access to literature and access to stories. And maybe a baseline what the Freedom Library has taught me is that we bring it back into the prisons. And none of us want to be in prison.
Of course not, yeah.
But we go in and argue that we deserve to live in a world where people would do the things that we do for us. And we recognize all of the times where we weren't there and capable and didn't have people showing up and doing this for us. My guy talked about reading heavy and getting to the last page and it was gone. And he was devastated because he couldn't find out how the book ended. And I said, listen, man, me and you should get D.A. Lemon to you and him to have a conversation about what it means to pick up his book and not be able to read the last page. Because, see, I thought his book mattered. So Freedom Reads got 1,000 copies of his book and put it in prisons all across the country.
We're going to take a quick break, but first, if you're a longtime listener or brand new to It's Been a Minute, be sure to come back every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday for brand new episodes. And did you know you can make it even easier to get new episodes by hitting the follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app? Whether you're a new friend or a loyal bestie, join the team by subscribing today. Coming up after the break.
I used to think I would die at 50. A friend told me that her husband had turned 75 over the weekend. And I thought, man, I can't wait.
Stick around.
This message comes from Radio Drama Network and the City University of New York, presenting If You Please, Hyman Brown's Radio Mystery Theater. Before podcasts, radio director Hyman Brown created audio storytelling, utilizing what he called the theater of the mind. His radio mystery theater in the 1970s used the finest writers and actors to bring stories to life. Select episodes from Brown's personal masters drop Thursdays. Listen where you get your podcasts. This message comes from BetterHelp. One of the hardest parts about starting therapy? not knowing what to expect. Instead of listening to an ad, hear from the people who've actually been there. Visit betterhelp.com/reviews to explore real client reviews that are updated every day. With an average live therapy session rating of 4.9 out of 5, based on more than 1.7 million client session reviews, the feedback speaks for itself. Visit betterhelp.com/reviews.
This message comes from Wise, the smart way to manage your money around the world. With Wise, you can send, spend, and receive money in over 40 currencies at the mid-market rate. Learn more at wise.com. T's and C's apply.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from strawberry.me. Be honest. Are you happy with your job? Are you stuck in a job you've outgrown or never wanted in the first place? Are your reasons for staying really just excuses for not leaving? Let a career coach from strawberry.me help you get unstuck. Discover the benefits of having a dedicated career coach in your corner and get 50% off your first coaching session at strawberry.me/NPR.
I also want to talk about the Inside Literary Prize. I mean, that I find to be such a interesting way to engage authors, just readers in general, and also the readers that you serve with the Freedom Libraries who are people in prison. So yeah, talk to us about the Inside Literary Prize.
So it was, France has a book prize that's judged by people in prison. It's one of the biggest prizes in the country. And so when the New York Times reported on it several years ago, people kept reaching out to me saying Freedom Reads should do that. And we got some collaborators, the National Book Foundation, the Center for Court Innovation, a librarian named Lori Fellas. They reached out to me and we became a team to put this together. And the thing is, we choose 6 states or territories, a men's prison and a women's prison in each state, and 25 judges at each locale. So 300 judges total. They read 5 books. They all engage with the books independently. People in the cell blocks read the books too, who not even in program, because they get engaged with the books. We always bring a writer in so that they have a 3-hour conversation, and then they do rank order voting. But then we bring a writer in and they have an event with a writer author event. But what's been really amazing though is that people get to be seen as like citizens. To judge is to be valued.
Well, to judge is to be revered also.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And we are talking about folks who never get a chance to judge. We have been judged, And so to be judged is sometimes to be reviled. But to be able to judge for something that matters. But man, also, you just hear him talking about the books. I heard a judge talking about a book from last year's contest. Chain Gang All-Stars won. But this guy had voted for One Woman's Madness. And he said, I really felt that book. I felt how she was challenging a lot of ideas around the patriarchy and the way men treat women in society. And I appreciated that because I had heard the ideas, but, reading it in a novel, I stopped myself cold. I was like, this brother sounds like a professor. And it was him being able to engage in the Inside Literary Prize that allowed him to build a community on the inside. They get to be seen as readers, as thinkers, as scholars. I started a book club for boys called Young Men Read, and that ended up getting me on the front page of the Washington Post. And that was the first thing that got me noticed by anybody. But I just started a book club because a friend challenged me and said, what are you doing to help young men read? And I thought I should build this thing. And then Freedom Reads was the same situation. Somebody challenged me to say, what would I do for others? And so I've been really blessed to have my greatest opportunities come when I was able to shift my gaze from my personal woes to like what my gifts might mean to others.
That's such an incredible reframe.
I'm getting old. When I was young, I never said things like this.
No, but I mean, but I mean, I was going to say, that's such an incredible reframe that kind of only comes with time and wisdom, But I also wonder too. Recently, like there was a documentary about your life called March 4th, and it premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival earlier this year. I got to see it. It's great. It's great. And like, I don't know, you've written and spoken about yourself and your life extensively. And, as you're saying, like you are having these reflections now that maybe you didn't even have 10 to 15 years ago. But I imagine it's still much different to see your life narrativized on screen. Like, what has seeing your story on screen changed about how you understand not just the work that you're doing, but how you understand yourself?
I think it was more so seeing it with my sons in the room. Because when somebody does a film about you, you are watching yourself being watched in moments that you weren't aware of being watched. And this is whether I'm railing against the machine with a broken hand or I'm smoking weed. It's just like the film captured me in moments that weren't just vulnerable. It was in moments in which that filter that you have in your brain from how you see yourself and how you want the world to see you completely vanished. And I think for me, because the film was done during a time period in which I got divorced, I discovered that I'm manic depressive, I got bipolar 2, and I have bad ADHD. And these things happen to somebody who went to prison at 16, came home at 24, and got in a committed in a long-lasting relationship with a woman. She was like 21, I'm 24. That's my first relationship. Then we get married. And so, you know, the breaking that happened and the unsettling that happening concomitantly with, you know, my brain being rewired, right? It was hard. And the film was happening during that time period. And Freedom Reads was growing. And we was raising additional $5 million, $10 million, going from one Freedom Library to 8 Freedom Libraries to 50 to 80 to 90 to 120. And I would just say watching the story on film made me feel in some ways more disconnected from my life than I'd ever been, you know, because
Really?
yeah, because, you know, I have been forced to move fast and I do feel like I'm a man who's had to invent his life, you know, so often that I look at it on screen and I recognize that if I would have paused to ask myself about the feasibility of whatever the next step was, I'm like one of those goats that climb the mountain. They making these impossible, you know, leaps and jumps and they climbing these mountains. I'm like one of those goats. You know, if the goat forget that he's doing the impossible, he becomes eagle food. And I feel like, you know, watching what was going on is this moment when I just realized that this could have easily not have happened. And I end up feeling profoundly grateful. But it's a lot. After my sons watched it, they were both happy that they did. And they had questions, but their questions weren't, you know, why are you like this or anything like that, you know, which is a beautiful thing to have your children see you portrayed on the screen like that and walk away loving you and asking the kind of questions that show that they paid attention. Like, hey, why were you in solitary confinement? You didn't explain that well.
No. You've had this journey, obviously, it's still ongoing. More than I think probably most people, you've had the opportunity to really think critically about like where you've been and how it made you feel and how it's affected your life and the lives of the people around you. And then also share that with other people. I mean, but you share a considerable amount. And we consider your life, your journey, your purpose. Even the way you frame it is like thinking about what you need, having someone ask you, what would you do if you had unlimited resources to be able to help others? There's like these big questions that show up that kind of nudge you toward what you should be doing or what's the next thing. I wonder, when will you know that your work is done?
I mean, it's interesting because I used to think I would die at 50. A friend told me that her husband had turned 75 over the weekend. And I thought, man, I can't wait. And to me, you know, the desire to imagine that as a possibility it was the first order accomplishment. I mean, that was the work, actually. You know what I mean? The work was to believe that my life was valuable enough to last long enough to see my children grow old. And you got to understand that when people who lived a life where they have never had that deep a sense of like loathing and worthlessness, then it seems radically incapable of being true. Except literature tells you that that's not the case.
Dwayne, you have given me so much to think about today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this conversation and also appreciate the work that you've been doing. Thank you so much for coming to talk with us about it today.
Thank you so much.
That was poet, lawyer, and the founder and CEO of Freedom Reads, Reginald Dwayne Betts. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Alexis Williams.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Cher Vincent.
Our executive producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from NetSuite. They say that every day your business is late to AI, you fall 2 days behind. Fortunately, there's NetSuite Next. NetSuite Next is where your business meets AI because AI is built into everything you do. It automatically surfaces custom insights throughout your day. AI agents work alongside you to solve problems. It's just like you're having a conversation with a colleague. If your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, try NetSuite Next for free. Go to netsuite.ai/story.
This message comes from Poshmark. If your fashion wish list lives rent-free in your brain, you need to be on Poshmark. With Poshmark, you're shopping millions of listings from thousands of closets, vintage finds, designer pieces, and everyday staples, all in one place. Search or let the discovery come to you. Poshmark makes it easy to find what you actually want to wear at prices that feel like a quiet win. Download the Poshmark app today and use code NPR when you sign up to get $10 off your first purchase.